Hey, what's up? This is Wilson back with Abysmal Hymns, and got Reza back with us. We are going to go over our top five punk albums. So, yeah, it's pretty straightforward. I did not include any hardcore
Yeah. Yeah.
albums, as I see those as two different things. I mean, I guess some of these bands influenced hardcore, but I'm not doing that. So, Black Flag is not on it, but we
Uh,
can we can
we
go
might have
from
some
there.
interesting surprises then. The
And
odd
I didn't
one.
do Minor Threat either. So
No, that is all out hardcore, to be fair.
yeah. All right, well, cool. You start us off, man.
All right. Well, just before we get going, it's just a very quick. I mean, I don't need to go into a massive explanation about what punk rock is, but in short, I understand in America the term punk, it means a bit of a reprobate, not someone who's particularly amazing. That's the impression that I get. It's not a phrase that we use here. Of course, Dirty Harry used it. I think one of the cop in a Scarface used it. So it's not exactly a term of endearment, but it is a pretty awesome form of music. So make of that what you will. And I think also, we've got to just quickly remember to put it into context of some description. Of course, music had really lost its way by the late 70s. No disrespect to Fleetwood Mac or Journey or any of that stuff. They're excellent at what they do. But I think it was time for a change and music needed a good kick up the arse. And hey, we certainly got that with some of these bands.
Right,
So,
yeah, punk is definitely a reaction, not wanting to be part of the mainstream radio scene.
absolutely. Cool. All right. So, shall I start off with my first choice?
Do go on ahead.
Super duper. Okay, so my very first choice, I'm going to be patriotic and, a band from London called The Ruts. And when people talk about punk rock, it's always the big names. We all know what the big names are. For me, these guys did what the Clash did, but in a far better way. Their first album, The Crack, which is my selection today, it's probably one of my favorite 77 orientated punk albums, even though it came out in 79. The band formed in 77. And the band sort of combined sort of pretty energetic punk rock, but added in elements of ska and reggae. And I suppose, in a way, alongside the Clash to a degree, can be seen as progenitors to what unfortunately would become known as ska punk in the 90s with some bloody awful music.
Mhm.
But these guys actually did it really well because they weren't sort of like jokey and all over the place. The music actually had something to say. So tracks on that album, such as Jar War, something that I said, they even dabbled in post punk with a track called It's Cold, which has a sparseness to it. So for me, the Ruts are one of the great lost bands of that scene. And of course, Rollins himself will acknowledge that. He's since sort of done a couple of live things with the band because, of course, Malcolm Owen, the frontman, passed away in 1980. So Rollins sort of filled in the spot really well there. So yeah, the Ruts, if you trace music, the Clash, the Ruts, Bad Brains, and so on, they to me they're kind of a band that transcended genres and really introduced a bit of experimentation as well.
Cool. Yeah, definitely. I have not heard that album. I've heard songs from it and I'm familiar with them. It's just somebody that I need to give a little more time with. I think that I like the fact that they're just not like a one, two, three go punk band.
No.
But they got a lot of layers. And they're from that kind of sweet spot, like the late 70s sweet spot. I like that intersection where, punk came out of rock and roll. So there was still a lot of rock and roll to it, and it wasn't just like playing chords as fast as you can.
Well, yeah, absolutely, and as I say, there's an album after The Crack also called Grin and Bear It, which it's not really a proper record. It's more sort of different cuts that they assemble together, a couple of live tracks, the famous song Inner Ruts on there. That's like the anthem for that band. And so that's worth checking out too. Yeah, a band that burned brightly, but for a very short time, unfortunately. So don't do heroin, kids.
My album is of the opposite
Hmm.
um message. It's Do Heroin Kids. And it's the Dead Boys, We Have Come for Your
Oh,
Children,
yeah.
their 1978 album. It
Okay.
comes from that sweet spot I was talking about where it's still very rock and roll.
Mm,
And there's kind of like there's a darkness to it, but not like a goth darkness or post-punk darkness, but it's like a you believe what they're saying.
yeah.
They're not like trying to pretend that they're junkies and they're really rich kids that are just trying to be cool. These guys are on, hard times and but they love it. And it's very like song oriented, I think, you
Yeah.
know. I mean, I guess there's the song on here, Son of Sam, that's a little darker.
Mm.
But found out I came about these guys by way of Guns N' Roses, who have been known to cover some Dead Boys. And yeah, so it's an album that stuck with me for a few decades.
I don't blame you. Fantastic band. Of course, the late great Steve Bators would go on to like a power poppy solo career and then Lords of the New Church before sadly passing. But yeah, very, very cool band. Roots of this band are from another band called Rocket from the Tombs, who are also worth checking out. But yeah, Dead Boys, huge influence on Bad Brains, by the way. And you can hear that on some of Bad Brains' early works, can't you? I think.
Sure, yeah.
Just that aggression and all out, And incidentally, I'm just looking up the album now. The record was produced, when you're talking about, a guy called Felix Peppalardi, who was in
Hmm.
Mountain.
Yep.
I mean, amazing. What a guy. I mean, to go from
Who would
Mountain.
have thunk?
I know. I mean, I love Mountain. I think they're a fun band, but really? Okay. Kudos to him.
Well, that guy, Felix Pavalardi, I've heard stories about him being like he was like a kind of like guy from the streets, So
Yeah.
I could see that he would admire that quality in this band.
Ah, fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah, I think he died quite young and of not great circumstances. But
Right.
yeah, good job, Felix.
All right, what else you got?
Okay, man. So my next choice is going to be a little bit more obvious, I guess. I'm going to go for The Damned. I would say they're probably my favorite English punk band. I saw them last year and they still got it. So, as we know, The Damned, part of that original explosion, they were reported to have the first ever punk single with Neuros. So that's their big hit, if you like. Other tracks like Stab Your Back and stuff like that. But the album I'm going for is called The Black Album. So at least 11 years before Metallica came up with the album of the same name, The Damned were doing it. And I love this album because it sort of saw them retain that punk rock root. So you got tracks like Hit and Miss, The History of the World Part 1, and Waiting for the Blackout. But you've also got really experimental things like Curtain Call, which is this like goth opera, 17 minutes of it. So I just love bands like this that really evolve their sound over time. And of course, the Damned were a huge influence on hardcore. Everyone from Rollins to Ian MacKaye, Jack Grisham of TSOL were huge Damned fans. So yeah, brilliant band, great evolution, still cut it live, and for me, definitely one of the defining punk bands of that time.
Right, yeah, they would be if I had a top 10,
Hmm.
I would have put them in it. I mean, obviously I gravitate towards their stuff that might not be on this list because it goes into more like a almost death rock
Yeah.
direction.
Phantasmagoria. Yeah.
Yeah, so but yeah, I mean, great musicians, can't state enough how influential they are. Um so yeah, I totally agree. I will on mine, I'm gonna stick to the color theme since
Okay.
you went with the black album, and I'm gonna go I'm gonna go with the blue album by the Adolescents from
Oh,
1981.
nice.
And it's not going to be surprising how I came about these guys because Rick Agnew plays guitar.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so this is his other band that's not Christian Death.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, this comes closer to that kind of one, two, three, go really fast in your face punk,
Hmm.
but there are plenty of songs where they just kind of dive into it and add some melody that balances out the aggression. And I think that it's definitely kind of a indicator of where punk was going in the 80s and the difference between 80s punk and what was happening in the 70s.
Yeah, I love that record. I don't think they ever really topped that one, to be honest with you.
No, yeah. Mm-mm.
Yeah, I mean, like, do you care about what's it called? Brats and Battalions? I can't even remember what that second album was called, but Agnew wasn't on it, so
Right.
probably the reason why it didn't stand out. Great album. I mean, I think I first heard of them from playing when I used to play computer games from Tony Hawk. I remember Amoeba,
Right.
thinking, yeah, what is this? This is like I could hear every single band like The Offspring and all of them. See, that's where they got their sound.
Totally. Yeah. Because
Great.
that, they were the California punk scene had a much different flavor than what was coming out of New York or Detroit.
Mm. Mm. Absolutely. I'm trying to think. I think the Adolescents were from the same scene as like TSOL and Agent
Right.
Orange
Hmm.
and had that very nihilistic, yet quite poppy sensibility at the same time. Obviously, there were the next generation of LA punk too, but yeah, flawless record and Agnew, man, on fire as usual.
Right. And I think an interesting thing about it is when you think about how environment influences, I think, punk more than other genres of music because what they're raging against
Mm.
is dictated on what they're surrounded by. So if you're in LA, then you're like totally against all the like, neon of Hollywood and what that kind of stands for.
A very brutal police force apparently back then as well, which
Right. Yeah.
some maybe say still so, but whatever. But yeah, I mean, absolutely. And I'm presuming very, very conformist times. So they were like, fuck that.
Right. Yeah. Because just think like that's when MTV had gotten big in the early 80s.
Yeah.
And so everybody had totally like even metal was starting to streamline, you
Yeah.
know. And I
Yeah.
think that a lot of those bands, that's where the conflict between metal and punk came in was in the 80s.
Mm, mm. I agree. Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of interesting, and maybe we can do a show in the future about crossover. But I remember, like, the Ramones always being inspired, like, by Black Sabbath. I'm sure Joey Ramone once mentioned that. So crossover was kind of happening, but you're right. Once the 80s hit, the what would you call it? The boundary lines, if you like, were really being drawn, and all that puffied haired ridiculous metal that was gradually unfolding had very little to do with the thrash stuff, never mind punk. So,
Right, right, right.
yeah,
But it is kind of funny, that like Motley Crue was super into punk,
yeah, that's true.
Like they thought they were a punk band, but then
Money.
yeah, by the time Theater Pain rolled around, that had certainly changed.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, good choice.
All right, what you got?
All right, so let's stick with LA, and I've got the band X, and I've got their first album, Los Angeles, from 1980. And this is kind of one of those bands which, again, they predated hardcore, obviously. They weren't a hardcore band. If you were going into this record thinking that you were going to get DRI, you're going to be bitterly disappointed. But if you want really good up-tempo punk with some hints of sort of psychedelia a la The Doors, in fact, they cover Soul Kitchen, and really amazing harmonies from Exene Cervenka and John Doe. And then on top of that, you've got a guy called Billy Zoom on guitar, who is this, I don't know what you call him, like this rockabilly dude who's a conservative. So if they're if that's not anti-establishment, I don't know what is, I mean, against, when I say anti-establishment, against the punk rock establishment, I should say. So beautiful harmony, so many amazing songs on here. Your phone's off the hook, but you're not. What a great title. Johnny Hit and Run Pauline. Sugarlight, yeah, Sex and Death, sorry, Sex and Dying in High Society, which is my favorite song on the record. And they featured in the Decline of Western Civilization too. So really, really cool band if you're into that melodic punk rock. I love Exene Cervenka. She's probably one of my favorite front women too.
Right, yeah. And I don't know, I've always liked John Doe's voice too.
Mm.
I think that
Yeah,
he worked well within that. And you know, that's another one of those albums, like there's so many great punk albums.
yeah.
That I've definitely dig it, but I don't know if I have put in as many hours with it as I have some of these others.
Sure, I understand that. No, they're one of those bands. They came from the same scene as the Germs and the Dills and the Weirdos and all that sort of what they call the Mask band, so the Mask Club, which uh, was quite a big venue for these sort of groups. So they're definitely from that early scene that sort of paved the way, whether the hardcore bands wanted to admit it or not, but they did pave the way for them.
Yeah, I so in the late 90s, I before I moved to Atlanta, I lived in Los Angeles,
Mhm.
and X was one of those bands. It was like if you were like a cool guy in a record store, you were always wearing an X shirt. And they
Yeah,
were like the punk rock band that they like everybody championed in Los Angeles.
sure.
So it took me a while before, and then back in then I was really just into like, Christian Death and 45 Graves. I didn't really expand out and start giving other bands like that a shot
Hmm.
until later. And then I was like, okay, now I can see, um, what the appeal of these guys is.
Well,
So for sure.
absolutely, yeah. And I'm someone who tends to veer more towards the faster stuff for the most part, but those harmonies are so irresistible and just so well crafted, such excellent songwriting at that. Have Ray Manzarek produce your first couple of albums. I mean, quite a coup in and of itself.
Right. Sure, sure, sure. And it's kind of funny that although I guess you can kind of see that from some of these albums I'm picking, is that, when it comes to punk, I don't like it when it's so fast you can't understand what's being said. Because
Yeah.
I think the message is important. I think Minor Threat is the only band in their hardcore, but they're the only band in the sphere of music that I listen to. They can get away with that. Because the message still gets through.
Mm.
Typically in the chorus when Ian McCabe, articulates a little bit better. But I remember growing up hearing some punk bands and couldn't understand what they were saying. Um,
Yeah, I mean, thought that was us. It's like, man, try listening to Cryptic Slaughter. That's
right.
I don't get me wrong, I kind of like that stuff, but it I have to be in the right mood for it. Sometimes I need something I can hum as well.
Right. And there's some bands, and this is more once again on hardcore,
Mm,
that I like where you can't understand what they're saying, and they like you look up the lyrics and there are these really like poetic things. Converge being the main band I'm thinking about here.
mm.
When you go see him live, doesn't sound like he's saying anything at all,
We
Just
can
sounds
say that about
sounds
Napalm
like he's like barking like a chihuahua that's enraged that the postman has shown up.
Well, it's funny, just to deviate very slightly. I remember an interview with Napalm Death. They did this show in England in the late 80s, around the time of enslavement to obliteration. And the host going, these lyrics are really good. He said, but I can't understand the bloody word. Like they're real poetry. And Lee Dorian explained to him, well, yeah, I mean, the music's so insanely fast, I couldn't really do sort of any kind of regular singing along to it because it would just get lost. So that's why it just comes out in that very guttural, shrieked manner. And I guess that's the same for like hardcore. I mean, you couldn't have them singing like Freddie Mercury, but
Right.
it just wouldn't gel. It would make any sense. So, yeah.
Yep, I get it for sure.
Okay.
Speaking of articulation, I guess these guys are, you can understand every word, and they're kind of like my answer to the Damned. But
Okay.
I didn't want to break the color scheme, and this is, pretty predictable, I guess. People that know me would obviously know that these guys were going to be on there, but it's Walk Among Us by the Misfits from
Ah,
1982. It's kind of a pop punk album almost,
it is. Well,
but it's the songs are just so well written, and I like the fact that they're singing about monsters and not politics, you know.
definitely one of the more fun bands, that's for sure. Yeah, I mean, I like it. I know Glenn Danzig's a very divisive figure, but there's no doubting, he's a great songwriter, and that album in particular, um, it's pretty damn good. It's catchy as hell. It's like the
Right.
Ramones if they got into horror films.
Sure, yeah. I can hear that. And I don't like really even know why Glenn Danzig is divisive. I mean, he is what he is, and either you like it or
Yeah.
you don't. I mean, the people not like that he worked out. I don't know.
I know there's
I
an
think maybe
incident.
it's his attitude. He is kind of a egomaniac.
Well, he takes himself maybe a little bit too seriously
Right.
sometimes, and it's like, Glenn, you're a talented dude, chill out a bit, it's all right,
I love that. Did you ever see the episode of Aqua Teen Hunger Force that he's on?
No.
Oh, yeah, you need to look that up on
Oh,
YouTube.
cool. Um,
He's on Aqua Teen Hunger Force, and he goes to buy this house, and as I remember it,
hmm.
there's a fountain that is full of blood, and he wants to make sure that it's full of elf blood. And yeah, it's hilarious. You would appreciate it.
Oh,
He made them draw him taller than he is.
that's brilliant. Oh, that's great. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, Sam Hain I really like as well, however you say that band. Danzig, the band itself, I'm hit and miss with, but definitely, yeah, the Misfits. Earth AD, of course, saw them meld into hardcore, really.
Right, right.
Um, I mean, I like that record, but I understand why some people might have been a bit put off, But uh, yeah, just great band, fun. What
Yeah, I
can you say?
saw them on the reunion tour they did like 2 years ago,
Sure.
and Dave Lombardo was playing drums, and it was
Nice.
sounded great. It was great. I mean, they had these screens on the TV, so it felt like on the stage, so it almost felt like you're watching Rob Zombie, and there were these huge inflatable pumpkins on either side of the stage. But
Brilliant.
you know, all right, what you got?
All right, so I'm going to go to something a bit classic now. Way back to 1970. I'm sure you know which band I'm going to say. It's the MC5. Um, for me, such an important band, kind of the big brother band to the Stooges, really. And yes, extremely political, of course. Everyone knows the story of the White Panther Party that their manager John Sinclair wanted to start. But just a band that took that sort of Chuck Berry rock and roll formula, sort of put in a bit of weird experimentation a la Sun Ra, and just turned everything up. And the album, of course, I'm talking about is Back in the USA, which was, I suppose, technically their first full-length album because Kick Out the Jams is like a live recording. And it's just so well put together. I love Wayne Kramer. God rest his soul. Well, God rest all their souls. They're no longer with us, any of them. And yeah, just such a huge, huge influence on everyone from the Sex Pistols to the Damned to later hardcore scene. I'm sure that guy from Rage Against the Machine, what's he called? Tom Morello's into them. So they just really laid the groundwork. I'm aware that there were bands before him before them as well, but for me, the MC5 and I suppose to an extent the Stooges too were like year zero for punk. So very important group for that reason.
Right, yeah, totally. It's funny because I always would hear stories from Alice Cooper interviews where he would be talking about how he would wind up on bills with the MC5 and how crazy it was that they were just like explosive. Um I'm a big fan of At the Drive-In, and you can definitely hear their influence on At the Drive-In.
Well, the hairstyles as well.
Oh
The
yeah, yeah,
afro thing.
Afros.
Yeah. Yeah, more than just the music, right? But yeah, the message, I totally hear that now. And although I don't like Rage Against the Machine, I have to say their cover of Kick Out the Jams wasn't bad.
I
Um,
barely remember it. I remember they also on that album they covered oh, Bruce Springsteen, right?
yeah, Ghost of Tom Joad, yeah.
Yep.
Sure. Yeah, no, no, good cover band for sure. Cool. All right.
Uh, so I'm going to pick up kind of where that left off and be the tag on to 1970
Mm.
with, and you have to know this is coming, the Stooges Funhouse album,
Sure.
which, and I think that that kind of the counterpoint to the very like political side of punk that MC5 covered, the Stooges are more the degenerates, you know?
Yeah.
Um, and because the album's chaotic.
Oh,
There's no
yeah.
question. And I don't know, like a lot of times it feels like they're just kind of jamming on some songs.
Mm. Mm.
Um, the song Penetration, they're just kind of like slinking around. But there's so much chaos and confrontation in it that, I mean, it's obviously like the MC5 where punk is starting. And I like Iggy Pop's voice. That's the thing, too. I think that him and Jim Morrison and David Bowie, I would say too, are probably the three archetypal influences for all goth singers.
Mm. You know what's really interesting? You mentioned Iggy Pop there, and uh, as someone who probably appreciates Joy Division, I think when he unfortunately hung himself, he was listening to a copy of The Idiot.
Right.
Um, I was like, okay, the album's maybe a tiny bit dark, but it's not exactly cut your wrists music. You know, it's fairly sort of, I don't know, low beat. What is it? You know, why would he have? Maybe it's just coincidental, but yeah, it seemed like an unusual choice. But great band, the Stooges. You know, it's funny these days in England. There's this radio channel called Six Music, and Iggy Pop's got a show on there. He's a good presenter, but you know, he's become one of these figures in the UK now that a bit like Nick Cave, where I like both of them, of course, and I love the music they put out, but it's a bit of overexposure to a point where I'm like, Iggy, I like you. I don't want to hear you on all the time. And all the cool people who listen to that station are going, yeah, we really like the Stooges. Oh, yeah, what, since 5 minutes ago? You know, it's that kind of thing. So I'm a little bit, maybe a bit tired as a result of that. But that's just my own prejudice. You know, I can't, not acknowledge the amazing musical legacy which they've left.
Right. Yeah, I would say, because we're not getting that in America. I wish we'd get some overexposure from Iggy.
He's certainly caught fire here. He's certainly
Right.
caught fire, which you could say is a good thing because he's getting paid at last and all this is.
Yeah.
But I suppose when something's, even if it's someone that I really like, when they're on all the time, it's a little bit like, all right, yeah, okay, oh, here we go. Another bloody interview with Nick Cave, for instance. Yeah, okay, we get it, Nick. You know, it's just kind of like, yeah, there's other people too. But Funhouse, great record. I actually prefer it to the self-titled debut.
Right. I think so too.
Yeah. I can't remember who produced it. It wasn't John Cale, was it? It was someone else.
Mm, Somebody that probably just left the studio and they just left the tape running. That's what it sounds like because the songs just kind of run together.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it's a great album. And plus it doesn't have that bloody awful song We Will Fall on there either.
Right, right.
That's quite a dull tune. So there's nothing like that on here, thankfully.
No.
Cool. All
All right,
right.
what you got?
So I know what you said about Black Flag earlier, but hear me out. So the song or the album I'm going to mention is Nervous Breakdown. Um, And I chose it for a very specific reason because when I was getting into punk rock, a mate played me, the Sex Pistols and all this stuff. And I thought, yeah, okay, it's fine, it's all right. Bit of energy, but it's just sort of souped up Rolling Stones. Then I kept hearing like people go on and on about Black Flag, particularly that band Amen. And they kept saying, like, oh, we got our Black Flag tattoos, we did this, we did that. I was like, who is this bloody band? I've never even heard of them. So I bought a copy of the first 4 years, which of course is all the stuff pre-Rollins. But the first EP, Nervous Breakdown, although it was a little bit faster, to me, demonstrated that this was the band that was essentially America's version of the Sex Pistols. The effect that they had, just the terror they instilled in every sort of conservative institution over there at the time was off the charts. And Keith Morris is such an amazing frontman. He's got the perfect punk voice, in my opinion, as the Circle Jerks and Off would testify to. But for me, Nervous Breakdown is probably the what one of my favorite sort of proto-hardcore slash punk rock releases of all time. And 4 tracks, in, out, done. And I remember seeing a video actually. Remember that film Falling Down with Michael Douglas?
Right.
That scene at the beginning where he's in the car and getting more and more frustrated. Someone had actually superimposed um, Nervous Breakdown on that scene, and it fit perfectly. So for that reason, yeah, Nervous Breakdown by Black Flag, one of the most important records in my life.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, I always gravitated more towards the Rollins Black
Sure.
Flag, but yeah, I can definitely appreciate the earlier years, which they were more punk. Like I think that
Yeah.
Rollins got things in the hardcore direction because, he was so aggressive.
I love the Rollins years too. Absolutely. I'm not one of those, I hate those people who are like, oh, well, I only like Des Cadena, for example, or fuck Rollins. Really? He was like on 4 songs or something. But I think that comes from their dislike of Rollins in
Right.
general. But yeah, I mean, I appreciate both, but it's only because I heard Nervous Breakdown and the first 4 years first that it's had such a massive influence on my life in terms of checking out other punk rock slash hardcore, whatever you want to call it, that I chose it. And that
Right,
cover
right.
art too, as well, that amazing Ray Pettibon cover art.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it is a cool looking album
Absolutely, man.
for
Yeah.
sure.
Cool.
So my last pick is going to be, and this is kind of one of the classics too, Fear the Record from
Ooh.
1982. I really like Leaving's voice.
Yeah.
So that and the fact that he does on a lot of these songs, he like comes out and actually sings. That was big for me. And I don't know, I mean, there's just the songwriting on the album is there in a way that it's not on a lot of punk rock records.
Great front man, yeah. That record is pretty exceptional. I'm trying to think. New York's all right if you is it New York's all right if you like
If you
saxophone,
don't, yeah, if you like sax, right?
saxophones, and then there's Beef Bologna,
Let's start a war.
A Star War, yeah, that's the other. And what's that? Living in the City,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So just some timeless classics. No wonder John Belushi was a fan.
Right.
It's a great record, and it's interesting because I think Lee Ving was quite a bit older than a lot of his contemporaries as well.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
is true. So it goes back to the Misfits. When I saw the Misfits reunion show, it was like the Misfits, Megadeth, and Fear.
Mm.
We were
Mm.
stuck in traffic, missed Fear. I was pissed, but Dave Mustaine brought out Leaving to sing one song with him during Megadeth's set, and he looked ancient.
Yeah, I know. Poor guy. Yeah, he is very old. I remember, do you remember a band called MOD?
Yep, yep. They did a
They
cover of Living in
they
the
did the
City.
cover. Yeah. I mean they were a very hit and miss band, but they did a pretty good job of it.
Right.
That's a fun cover. But yeah, I talk about Mustaine. He also did a collaboration with Lee Feng. This thing, is it MD45 or
Hmm.
something? I don't remember it particularly well, but it's supposed to be quite decent
Yeah, it
nonetheless.
was one of those songs was what they covered.
Right, okay. Cool. Yeah, great band. Again, I guess they were one of those that's like the progenitors of hardcore, really.
Sure, yeah, I could see
Uh,
that for sure.
yeah, yeah, very cool. Yeah, good choice.
Awesome. Well, there we go. I guess we'll have to talk about hardcore next, since that's where the conversation seems to go. Um,
Always centers around hardcore when it comes to me.
and there's such a hardcore's the same way. Hardcore in the 90s is very different from hardcore in the 80s, just like we saw with punk. The punk from the 70s was a lot different from the 80s.
That's going to be an interesting one to cover for sure. Looking
Right.
forward to it.
And I think that hardcore, kind of like had a better showing than punk in the 2000s, maybe.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, and as I said, we'll touch upon it more in the next show. But yeah, I mean, I tend to be a bluff old traditionalist in terms of, oh, 80s hardcore was the real deal. And I'm not quite as bad as that, but some of the stuff where it starts to move into almost to the point where it gets like, well, this is just metal, isn't it? With just the odd beat down. I can't say I'm as fond of that stuff, but when it comes to sort of the crossover sort of thing, I can appreciate that a little bit more.
Right.
But hey ho, it's a big genre, so take your pick.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, I kind of draw the line into like the 90s. Once it got more metal than that, I was not, and I'm somebody that listens primarily to metal. So,
Sure.
um,
Yeah.
like Integrity, they were like they still
Um,
kept a good balance. And they sang about Charles Manson a lot. So, I was a fan of that.
Dweed's an interesting Dweed's an interesting character, that's for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Very, very odd guy. And I like what they called ringworm as well. I think they've got a very breakneck style to them. They're a lot of fun.
Well, cool. We'll pick up
Sure.
on hardcore then.
We will do. Okay.
And thanks for coming back on.
Always a pleasure. Thanks, man.